a little different today. I am in person because I too have moved to Boston.
Yeah, and you're holding a snack?
I am,
Question mark?
and this is a finger,
Mhm.
a pretzel finger. I thought this was a good mascot for today's theme, which is laboratory mishaps or laboratory
Lab horrors.
horrors. Yeah,
Mhm.
lab horrors. Originally it was just lab spookies, but I think this is more horrors than spookies.
Mhm.
So the reason this topic came up was because I just started a new lab, and when you start a new lab, you are sat there for the first month doing safety training, and I was sitting through like chemical safety training, hazmat training, like all kinds of training, and I was sat there and I was just like, you know what, this is a great topic for Halloween. And since Halloween's coming up next week, we thought it would be a fun time to talk about it.
Yeah, we usually try and do like a spooky science.
Yeah, that's
stream
true. And in the
every-
past, we did like weird animals and creepy animals and things.
Yeah.
And I feel like this one's pretty apt. This one is
Yeah.
spooky, scary, and it's just like things that really genuinely could happen to
Yeah.
us in the lab.
Also unrelated, but do I look at you or do I look at the
I
camera?
think
This
we
is
look
weird.
at the camera.
Okay.
Like awkward.
Like yeah, so this is very like as you can see from our name tag, I think this is the first time that we have actually been streaming in the same location, I think, ever. Yeah, anyway, we'll figure it out.
Yeah, super exciting. But yeah, it was right. You don't have to look at me.
Yeah.
Look at the
Okay,
camera.
look at the camera. And then I'm like looking at you through the camera. But okay. Yeah, anyway, yeah, so I guess the other thing that happened recently was last week I was in an experiment where I had to design a bioweapon. And actually I'm not sure if I was in an experiment or if I got like framed for making a bioweapon. But so supposedly like what this experiment was supposed to be about is they were actually interested in how large language models could help people who wanted to make a bioweapon do so. And so they took us and they put us in a room and let us use a couple of different large language models, and they asked us like, how would you weaponize, like how would you like create the 1918 flu, basically. So this is something that a lot of its genome has actually been sequenced, so we kind of know what it is. But yeah, and they were curious about kind of like, could we design a plan that would create this flu virus and release it and use it to cause havoc, and would the large language models help? And the reason I say it was kind of sketchy was like because like it wasn't like in any like it wasn't actually in the lab. They had us go to this like random like office building next to MIT, and then like they're like, okay, come up with your plan, and then I'm like, okay, I made a plan after a couple hours, and they're just like, could you email this plan to us? I was like, I mean, I guess like so. Yeah, I might have been framed for making a 1918 flu. Like if there's like an outbreak of 1918 flu, it wasn't me, hopefully.
I was gonna say
Anyway.
something like this is not that far off the mark for something that would genuinely happen. So, for example, like the CDC will run the zombie apocalypse scenario as a training exercise to be like, what do we do? How do we isolate? Like, how do we do these things? And literally the scenarios we get would be like, there's a zombie apocalypse, like how do we quarantine? How do we like, where do we like park the cars? Like where do we, where's the PPE? How much PPE do we have? Like where do we cordon the people? Like what is the plan?
Mhm.
And that is a genuine like exercise. Like which are the bomb shelters? Like where do you put the humans? And like this is genuinely a thing that happens. And it's like, it sounds funny that's like zombie apocalypse. And it's just like, well, if you swap out the zombie apocalypse for any like virus or so do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
like you could
yeah,
genuinely
yeah.
swap it out for something. And so like it makes the training exercise equally more scary and less scary, I guess, because it's like, hey, at least we're trying or practicing or like we're doing the exercise.
Yeah, it is weird that they use a zombie apocalypse and they don't say like like SARS or something, right?
Yeah,
Like,
well, I think it's because they say a zombie apocalypse because then you would have to figure out all the
I
different
see.
versions of it. Like
You
if
can
you,
change all the parameters.
yeah, because if you
and
said it was
stuff,
SARS, then you're like, okay, this is an airborne thing. This is like, you know what I mean? Like this
Yeah.
fomites, like this, like, well, the zombie, like a hypothetical zombie apocalypse, we don't know how it gets spread, right? Like it's a hypothetical, and so you would have to deal with all the different versions of possible ways of getting it spread. Speaking of viruses, so during my training, or while I'm still in the middle of my training, they gave us a lot of scenarios, and some of these scenarios were like, in this year, Marburg virus killed this many people, and then like went away, and we still haven't figured out how it was spread, but it was definitely spread. And then sometimes they're like, oh hey, this was spread in the lab. We thought it was an attenuated version, and then it wasn't, and then all these people got salmonella. And they ended up in the hospital and were really sick.
So was it because it like mutated to be not attenuated anymore?
No, I think it was just more it was attenuated, but like it wasn't, it didn't mutate. It was just genuinely bad.
Not attenuated.
It wasn't, yeah, it wasn't like, you know, its natural form attenuated was already bad enough to get people sick. But a lot of things actually kill people. Like I was genuinely surprised how many, and like when I think like laboratory safety things, I'm like, oh yeah, this thing, like every like rule they have is like someone died a long time ago. Like in my mind, like in the 40s or 50s, like that was the era when it was like the Wild West and people were like not wearing gloves and like eating in the lab and stuff. But then like you look at the years when like these people died and it's like 2012. I was just oh okay, this isn't that long ago. Or like 2009, like the plague was released accidentally in a lab in 2009, and like a lot of people like 4 people died and like 9 people were hospitalized. But like and like it wasn't because they weren't doing the correct things. It was like the safety cabinet was made of wood and it like degraded and like it went into the ground, and then people were wearing PPE when they were cleaning, but then it was like aerosolized, and then like 9 of the people ended up in the hospital, and then like people died.
So the plague was being kept in this wooden box that went into the ground.
and it seeped out, and like let's be real, this kind of stuff kind of happens a lot. Like I remember Nate and I, when we first met in right after college, we went to the same lab, and literally the first emails we got when we were in this lab was clean out your negative 80s because there was unlabeled, was it smallpox?
Yeah.
It was smallpox. And it was like everybody needs to inventory their negative 80 freezers because, you know, one lab was just like, oh, look, smallpox. Just in a vial, in a box in the negative 80. And we're like, oh, okay, oops.
Oops. Yeah. It's actually, so there was an investigation, like when it happened, obviously, and I was reading the report of it, and it's actually kind of hilarious because like basically like it details all the steps. So just basically people just find this box, and then like this person who finds it is like, is this smallpox? And then he like takes it to his supervisor and is like, yeah, that seems like it could be smallpox. And then for some reason they bring it to the director's office and then just like put it on their desk and wait for the director to show up. And then the director confirms that it's probably smallpox. And then
so you asked me what are things that I would never work with, right? Like we were you know, brainstorming about things to talk about, and like where is our line, like our personal line. I think it's different for everyone, and this is like a choice. And I think if you asked me like 10 years ago, before I started working in a lab, or like before I picked like the field of science I was into, I always thought like chasing like diseases was a really cool like a really cool way to use your science. Like you figure out what's wrong with the disease, like what's going on when there's an outbreak. Like I thought I could be an epidemiologist. Like you could travel, it's like the Indiana Jones of like biomedical science, and you could just like where there's an outbreak you go towards it, and then like you know pitch a lab, and then like you figure out what it is, you sequence things, and then I thought about it for real, and I was just like, I am a sloppy person. I am prone to accidents, and like if there's something that's like virulent and I'm gonna like accidentally get it, but if I touch my eyes, like I'm gonna get it.
You're gonna get it, yeah.
Yeah, if there's a mosquito that has it, I'm gonna get it. Like mosquitoes love me.
Oh,
Like I was
yeah.
just like, oh wait, you know what? Maybe I should not be working with infectious
So that was
diseases.
when did that happen?
Like when did infectious disease like
when
I
did you go
decided
from being like, this is cool?
this is cool and I want to do it? I think sometime in college I was taking like a bioanthropology course, and it talked about like how like these anthropologists would like go and live in the places they were writing about, and then they would like get giardia or get like intestinal parasites and like various things that are like long term like in their gut forever, and I was just like, I don't want to live through that.
Yeah, you're just like, I would rather not.
Yeah, it was just like things that don't have, like many things don't have like fixes. Like a lot of things do, but many things don't. And I feel like a lot of infectious diseases, like especially when you're like on the cutting edge, this is the area where you're like, yeah, you might have a long-term long-term effect and you might die.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd like not to die early. I am a very inquisitive person, but like I don't want to be the dead
you
cat.
You don't want to be the dead cat that curiosity killed.
Yeah, yes. Correct. Yeah, so that's my personal line when it comes to science.
Yeah.
Pretty much we'll go anywhere else though.
Yeah, we were talking about this because there's a chemist called Derek Lowe who he does a blog that's really interesting on chemistry called In the Pipeline. And one of the series that he runs is a column called Things I Won't Work With. So that's why we were talking about this. But yeah, I think the thing that I won't work with is high voltage, as I was mentioning to Ruby a little bit before. So once I decided to try and build a TMS machine, which is a kind of brain stimulator. It stimulates the brain by generating really high currents, magnetic fields. So you need high electric current to generate this very strong pulse of magnetism. Anyway, long story short, I was working on this thing and I somehow short-circuited it through my body. And when you get very high voltage, it actually paralyzes you because it interferes with how your muscles work. So for about a minute, I was just stuck being shocked by this thing, and I like couldn't move away from it.
That is so scary.
Yeah, and so that's after that, I was like, okay, I could have died. Now I'm just like, okay, high voltage is where I draw the line.
Yeah, I won't work with that anymore. Yeah, I think another place. So I worked in a chemistry lab for a little bit in high school, actually. And I remember like that training was this. I feel like the safety training in chemistry labs in particular are like another level of high. Like in biological sciences, it goes like BSL 1, 2, 3, 4, and that's basically it. And like 4 is like everything incinerates. But like when it comes to chemistry, even the lowest level of chemistry, like safety is like high. Really high. Yeah, like even their lab coats, like their lab coats are not white. Their lab coats are like dark, usually of some like darker color, and they're like anti-flame resistant. Like they're like flame retardant lab coats. Like you have to like glove properly. Like they're really careful about like where the gloves go on over your lab coat in case it like rides, like whatever substance rides up your hand.
Oh wow.
Yeah, and like they'll tell you like these like scary stories about like how even if someone does everything correctly, you could still die.
Oh wow. Yeah.
So one of the deaths happened in 1996. So this chemist, her name was Karen Wetterham. She was in I think she was, where is she? Dartmouth. Yeah, she was a professor of chemistry at Dartmouth, and she worked with the heavy metals. And so she was doing everything correctly. She was wearing gloves. She was wearing her lab coat. She was working in a fume hood. Like she was doing all the things correctly. And apparently, like a drop of I think it was dimethyl mercury.
Ooh.
Yeah, like it like seeped through her gloves, and I think at the time the glove recommended for chemistry work was latex, and so latex, dimethyl mercury can just like go through those gloves in seconds, and so she like didn't think anything of it because it was like on her glove, so she took off her glove, washed her hands, and then like went on with her day, and like she died within a year.
Oh wow!
Of like
that's terrifying.
I know, and she had like all the symptoms of heavy metal poisoning. Like she lived through it like slowly, and like that's so scary. Like she did everything correct. Like I think that like really brings, really like I don't know, like like that's like something that like sticks with us, right?
Mhm.
Because like
Yeah.
she was just doing everyday run of the mill science.
Mhm.
Oh, okay.
Oh,
Sorry for
spam.
bothering you.
It's
Oh
spam.
wow, it is spam.
Yeah,
Wow.
we don't have to read that off.
We reached the level of getting
Yes.
spammed.
I mean, yay.
Yay, I guess.
Yeah, cool. Anyway,
Yeah. So that was like, those are pretty upsetting stories. Another one that actually, I think the one that I get creepy crawlies. I think this one's a spooky one for me. Do you know the feeling where people are like the fingernail and chalkboard feeling? So I get fingernail and chalkboard feeling when I hear about dismembered anything. Like, so
that makes
dismembered
sense. Yeah.
limbs, dismembered mostly fingers and hands parts. So I remember, so when I was working in this chemistry lab, my first lab ever, right out of high school, they made us sit through the training, and they showed these videos, and it was like the equivalent of driver's ed. You know, when in like high school, I don't know if you went to this in my high school, they just show you videos of like crashed cars and like people getting pulled out of the cars. Okay, so they showed you the equivalent of that, but like laboratory accidents.
Ooh,
and it was just like it was
scary.
so gory, and like it would be like, this machine usually has blades in it to like flat, like it's like a saw thing, and like usually when we check it there's brushes, and so one day instead of brushes it was blades, and then he had stuck his hand in and his hand was like completely mangled, and they like showed you
check it by sticking your hand
and then they were like, this is why you use the tool, and I was just like, no shit, I would never put my hand in there. Like that basically was it. It was like, why would you put your hand in the garbage disposer? Like, it'll be like, the laboratory disposer that that crumples things down so it goes into the thing, but like to clean it there's a brush setting, and so usually he just checks for the brushes, and I was just like, why?
Yeah.
Like, but these are things that can happen. They showed us pictures of like not people that didn't tie up their hair for women. Like, please do tie up your hair. Like, whenever I'm in the lab and I see someone with their hair not down, I'm just like, did you not watch the video with the people with hair on fire?
But like,
and like 3rd degree burns. Hospital. Like, don't do it.
But like, honestly, I understand like why people do that stuff, because like I feel like there is a thing where it's like because most of the time you do that and it's fine, right?
Correct. Yeah.
And like a lot of the time, like you're not even told not to do it. Like,
that's true. We don't check each other. I feel like there's like an etiquette thing. It's kind of like rude to be like, yo, your toes are showing, like put some shoes on.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not gonna check you if you show up in lab with like out covered toes. And like that's why they have like a regulatory person come by and do spot checks on us, and they're like, hey, put on your shoes and your long pants.
I do think it's interesting, like that it's very like the culture varies by lab too. That's true. Like one lab I worked in, like it was very much like if you were like didn't go through your decontamination procedure right, like people would yell at you. And like
because it could ruin someone else's experiment. Right?
Yeah. That's fair. And there was another lab where I had to be like, hey, maybe we should not like break people's skin while we're doing this procedure, because like we're not really doing anything to like decontaminate the blood. And then everyone's just kind of like, oh, bloodborne pathogens, what? But
what's that?
So it's like it's very different. Like, yeah,
that's true. I think lab to lab there's a culture thing. I think different institutions have different things. I think undergrads actually have a really different lab structure, and actually a lot of accidents happen in undergrad labs, like more than I don't know if it's more. Look at the numbers, labs. But I think no, number wise is more, but I wonder if it's because all undergrads have to take lab. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's just like a larger sample. Like number wise, they have more injuries, but like I think percentage wise, it's about the same.
Oh, interesting.
But I was just like, well, they're not. I don't remember doing anything that dangerous. And then I looked up like what went wrong, like lists of things that went wrong, and it's like centrifuge exploded, and I was just like, oh, this is why you load your centrifuge correctly. Like like things to where they're like, don't misbalance your centrifuge, and you're like, yeah, it's fine. Like
So for context, like centrifuges are a bit scary. In that, like, so they just spin things extremely fast and generate a lot of centrifugal force. And if they're not balanced, kind of what will happen is that
It
it will
wobbles.
start to, and if it wobbles too much, eventually the rotor will actually kind of break off and go flying across the room.
Yeah, and then with the contents,
Mhm.
and sometimes those contents are not inert.
Mhm.
So that could go really wrong.
But also just mechanically. So like my dad is a chemist and he had a story about a centrifuge that failed and just the rotor actually just like punched through a couple of walls.
Ooh.
Because you think about it, like the whole point of the centrifuge is to
Yeah.
generate a lot of force on the sample. So kind of if that
Yeah.
goes wrong. Yeah.
Yeah, I can go like 1,000, was it RPMs? Like
Yeah.
it's going pretty fast.
Like what is the usual G-force in
I-
a centrifuge?
I don't actually know. We could probably look that up.
I think it's usually like a couple hundred G's, right?
Yeah, but like it can literally separate like your blood.
Uh-huh.
Like it can separate different kinds of your blood to like literal levels. Like you could see it with like a line. G4. Oh, there's a calculator.
No, I just want.
G-force calculator for.
Anyway, though, the point that I was making about this was like, it's hard to actually.
It's not like a
Yeah.
single number, right?
Anyway,
Because it depends
yeah,
how fast
yeah.
you turn on.
But
your-
yeah, it's
and how
the
long.
point is like it is basically it is like tens to hundreds of times the strength that Earth's gravity pulls on you. So you imagine it's like something basically being pulled with that, like thrown with that much force. It's a lot of force. Yeah.
Another
Anyway.
scary one is like when people share lab benches and people put things down the drain that they're not supposed to. Yeah, so flammables are not supposed to go down the drain. I don't think about it too hard. Like when I'm at home, like if I'm spraying alcohol like on my lab bench, spraying things on like on like counter in the kitchen, and like some alcohol goes in the sink. I do not think about it too hard, but I never pour down alcohol
Right.
down the sink.
Uh-huh.
But sometimes after an experiment, people incorrectly put alcohol down the sink or some kind of flammable down the sink. Someone else in the same lab or in the sink system that is shared, like throws their like hot or burning thing into the sink.
And then the sink
Flaming-
explodes.
The entire sink, like flaming fireball coming out of the sink. Like
I mean, that sounds kind of cool.
kind of cool, also really dangerous.
Yeah.
Like,
Imagine just being like some undergrad in the lab, and
yeah.
like you're just like, okay, so I tried to get rid of the alcohol and the sink exploded.
Yeah. We've been in a lab where a sink exploded. So some people drop their dry ice into the sink, like when they're done with it, and like that temperature differential is enough to like crack the sink sometimes, which is.
Wait, was this the lab we were both in?
This is a
Oh,
lab
I
we were
didn't.
both
I didn't
in.
remember the sink
Yeah, so
exploding.
dry ice, I feel like I don't know if we treat it like we don't treat it as a dangerous thing that often, but it's a common thing to have in a lab. And like you can do stupid shit and kill yourself with dry ice. Like starting with like asphyxiating yourself. I remember I was moving.
Yeah, so dry ice
Yeah.
is just frozen carbon dioxide. So the biggest problem is that kind of as it melts, it turns into carbon dioxide, which then kills you if there's too much of it.
It's literally how you euthanize
Yeah.
animals.
Uh-huh.
But like we were stuck in an elevator with a large vat of dry ice one time.
Oh, that's scary.
And we're like, so how much time do you think we have before they need to come get us? Because we were transporting, so like the dry ice gets delivered on the loading dock in the back of the lab or building. So we would have to go down with these like bins, like these pretty large like barrel bin size bins, and fill them with dry ice, and then like roll this thing into an elevator, which
Oh,
fits
wow.
like 2 people in that thing, and then like elevator gets stuck midway up of the thing, and you're like, I'm in an elevator with dry ice. Like,
Did you like
is it
call,
cool?
did you like call the fire department and like tell them?
oh yeah,
that?
you
Or,
know
like,
that button,
yeah.
the red button
Uh-huh.
on the elevator. Yeah, I called that thing. I was like, so I'm on an elevator right now, and I have a whole thing of dry ice. So you need to come get me like right now.
Were they freaked out about that?
I don't
Like, okay.
No, I don't think they made the connection, but like I
Okay.
was minorly freaked out. I was just
Yeah.
like, I need to do. I'm like not usually scared of being stuck in an elevator. Usually it's like I'm like fine, but like I
But
had
you're
a whole
scared of
bin.
being asphyxiated.
Yeah, I was an entire bin. And actually, in that first lab I ever was in the loading dock where you're supposed to like take the dry ice and move it to this bin, it came in like a dumpster sized thing of dry ice, and I'm like 5 feet tall, and so to get into the dry ice, I would have to be on a stool, and I would have to like bend over and go
That's
into
scary. Yeah.
into the thing. And my advisor, or like the person that was training me, she was just like, "Can you please like at least hold on to one thing?"
Like have like a rope or something.
Yeah, no, just like hold on to the door on the outside. She was just like, I don't want you to like head first into the dry ice bin and not be able to come out. So like these things could have happened, right?
This is-
Like,
Yeah, this is only marginally related, but I learned so one of my hobbies sometimes is like urban exploring, and so one of the things that I learned is that it's very different. It's very dangerous to go into anywhere that contains like water and metal, because there's a chance that the water will have caused the metal to oxidize and used up all the oxygen in the enclosed space, and you don't you
That is
don't
scary.
know if that is true unless you have an oxygen meter, or unless you just crawl in there and pass out and die. So we actually can't. So we actually cannot sense.
that's true. Like we can't smell it, right? There's no
Right,
there's
we can't smell a lack of oxygen. We can't actually sense a lack of oxygen. So kind of what makes us feel like we're feeling short of breath is actually an accumulation of carbon dioxide. So if you have a normal amount of carbon dioxide and no oxygen, you actually feel fine until you pass out and die.
So when we feel altitude sickness, is that a similar experience?
Yeah, so altitude sickness is interesting because one of the things it's actually caused, a lot of the symptoms are due to not having enough carbon dioxide.
Oh,
So
that is strange.
It has to do with, even though you're not consciously aware, when there's not enough oxygen, your breathing speeds up, but then that decreases your kind of blowing off carbon dioxide faster than you should be, and it changes the pH of your blood, and that's what causes a lot of the altitude sickness symptoms.
That actually does make sense.
Anyway,
fun
fact.
Sorry, dry ice. That doesn't sound that scary. Okay, another kind of scary thing is actually people that put it in an enclosed thing, like a plastic bottle. It kind of just becomes an explosive device. Like
how explosive?
So like,
wait, are you just telling people how to make a bomb?
I'm telling people how to make a bomb. I'm telling you, like, please do not do it. Like, there's a lot of experiments where they're like put I don't know, like Coca-Cola, like put like a menthol. Was it a menthol? Like a piece of candy.
Mentos?
Yeah, Mentos with like a lot of holes in it. And it'll like become a little fountain thing. But like imagine that, but like way worse and way more dangerous, because the amount of the amount of gas that is expelled when these little pellets of dry ice melt is like it becomes way more than that space, and so if it's not enough space to vent it, it'll just explode the bottle. Yeah. So like if you like literally put dry ice in like a bottle, that bottle will become shrapnel. Like,
oh wow.
Yeah, and it can like puncture. Yeah, it's like bullets. Like it's like a grenade. And it's like something you don't think of either,
yeah, no,
right?
I was not.
Yeah, like if you put,
that makes sense.
Yeah, like if you put dry ice in a water bottle, like a plastic
like
bottle.
a plastic water bottle.
Yeah, it will like basically explode and become shrapnel, like little pieces of plastic, because it'll harden the plastic too.
Oh yeah.
And then it'll be like sharp and
scary. I know people who used to do that as like a prank. Like
not a good prank. Yeah. Like you could literally kill someone. It could like cut into someone's artery and like they're out. That's scary. Yeah, scary, right? Yeah. And it's just like, oh yeah, like whatever lab thing, you can get dry ice at the grocery store. And I was just like, oh, okay.
So we talked a lot about kind of like stuff that you shouldn't do, like crawling into rusty metal caves and like eating dry ice or like whatever. But I feel like some of the things that I find like the scariest are actually things which is like it's not a mistake, like it's just like stuff that can go wrong and you have no idea.
Even if you're doing everything correctly. Yeah, stuff that can go wrong.
My favorite of those is actually there's actually been one outbreak. Well, okay, now there's been 2 outbreaks of Ebola in the U.S., but the last one was in 2014. But before that, there's a big outbreak of Ebola in the U.S. In Reston, Virginia, and it basically we completely dropped the ball on it. Kind of there was this facility that housed research monkeys, and they just all suddenly died. And then they sent samples of their blood to figure out what was up with them. And they did microscopy, and they were like, these have Ebola. And then they also tested the people. They tested the people who like worked with the monkeys, and they were also infected with the Ebola.
Oh no.
And it turned out that actually, just like by incredible luck, this is the one strain of Ebola that doesn't cause severe disease in humans.
Oh my gosh, that's so lucky.
Yeah,
Oh,
like
that's
so some of these
lucky.
people had kind of some like flu-like symptoms, but like it, like they completely dropped the ball. Like it was just like they had no idea what was going on, and then like a few weeks later, they just are telling people like, "Huh, it looks like you have Ebola."
Oh no, I think the zoological like jumps are really scary, right? Because like the one of the reasons bats get such a bad rap is because they spend time with other animals. So like they spend time in like the rafters of like the sheds where livestock live, pigs, sheep, horses, whatever, and they like their feces mingle. And they also share spaces with us. Like there's probably bats in half the homes, in the roof of half the homes, like in this country. They're just sharing space with you. Like there's nothing you can do. Like, that's scary. That is pretty spooky.
Yeah.
I think that's
Yeah.
that's one of the more scary
It's
things
definitely
about.
spooky. Yeah, or her. Yeah, I think like it wasn't like it's like there isn't anything. The scary part to me is like this wasn't even like a laboratory that like studied Ebola or anything. So actually, what happened was like the monkeys got infected from these other monkeys that they just interacted with in the wild, and those happened to have Ebola.
Yeah. That sucks.
Yeah.
Oh, that's scary. That's really scary. That's really close to home. I was in Virginia very recently.
I mean, that's the scariest part of it. Is like it's just like it could
it could happen anywhere. It could happen in the States. It could happen like really far away. Like this.
A related scary story is, so I have a friend who studies prion diseases in hamsters.
That's so scary. Okay, prion diseases are very scary. So I guess people know it as Creutzfeldt-Jakob's or
mad cow disease,
or mad cow or Curare. Yeah, like I think those are like the other names for it. Basically, it makes your brain like Swiss cheese.
Yeah.
That's
and like
scary.
it can take a very long time to Swiss cheese your brain too. So like
you don't even know you
right.
have it.
Yeah, so that's actually what she was just mentioning this like kind of casually a while ago, where she was just like, well, it's like you always kind of wonder like, did I get exposed to this, and like am I gonna develop dementia in like 5
earlier?
years?
Yeah. Oh, that's so scary. So the scary thing about prions is that it doesn't even use DNA. Like it literally is just like protein that's folded a certain way, and when it's around other protein, it'll fold the other protein similarly, and that's how it spreads. Like you literally cannot get rid. Like it's so hard to get rid of. I think the only way to properly get rid of it is like incinerate it until it's just like heat the shit out of it, and then it's gone. Or like the proteins denature and it no longer is in that shape. But like, what are you gonna do? Like incinerate an entire field with cows? Like they're dropping their prions everywhere.
Yeah. I mean, I think they did that when they had outbreaks of mad cow disease in
like
Europe,
controlled burn.
Yeah.
That's like
prions. Yeah. Although I will say, so the advantage, like what happened with the mad cow disease. So there, like this was in like the 90s. There was actually in Europe there were a lot of people getting mad cow disease, and luckily they were able to get it under control mostly just through good like epidemiology. Like they were able to say like, okay, like they figured out it was transmitting from sheep because sheep nervous tissue was being used in the cow feed, and so basically they had stricter regulations on basically how you could make the feed for animals, and also like which kind of organs you could sell for human consumption, and that really did seem to kind of stop the transmission of it.
That's really good. Like I mean, that's kind of cool too. That like we went for an epidemiological approach. Like we can't solve this, so we're gonna go with like
we don't have any drugs or vaccines or anything that are effective.
Like we didn't science our way out of it. Oh, I guess it is science, but like we didn't try to like engineer or create something to fix it.
Yeah,
like we didn't try to medicine our way out of that one.
Right. Although it is kind of amazing when you think about like when you think about like that's, I mean, basically you're like you start off, you're thinking like, okay, this is some sort of bacterium or virus or toxin, and it's just like you're just like, what is this? Right?
Yeah, like what could have been?
Mhm.
That's. I lost my train of thought. I was just thinking. I was thinking about the
prions.
the prions. Yeah. Oh man, I remember learning about prions. Actually, a lot of the like neurodegenerative diseases don't really have a solve for it. Those generally are really scary. I think because I'm a neuroscientist, I think about neurodegenerative diseases a lot more than the regular Joe. And I think that those are probably the more scary things you could tell me. Like I'll like, I mean, knock on wood, but I'll
like
take
dementia.
Yeah, like I'll take other diseases, but like I feel like when it comes to like dementia, it's like you lose yourself, right? Like you lose, like it's slowly going away.
Yeah.
That's more scary than like you broke your arm,
Right.
Like, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like, or you need an organ transplant, or like 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 you're amputated a limb, like those, like that's scary. But like I think the degeneration things are more scary
Stuff that's
to me.
affecting like your sense of self.
Yeah, yourself and just like your existence and your being, like that. I think that's a very scary way to go. Yeah. Scary things. Happy Halloween.
Any other like did you have any other scary things that happened to people?
Oh, that I know of that happens?
Or just like of like scary lab accidents? Like,
oh yeah. So I came up with like a list of lab accidents. Because I know, I like while I was taking this training, I was just like, like maybe I should, keep track of some of these. So I guess we can go through some of them. So there was there's many needle stick injuries. So needle stick injuries. So one of the reasons they're like, do not cap your needles, it's like a training thing, is because when you cap your needles, it's a common place to accidentally miss the cap and poke yourself. So needle stick injuries are pretty bad. And it's like I feel like more common in like hospitals. And this is how people get whatever disease their patient may have had. And so this things like hepatitis and HIV and things like that don't need a large amount to of it. Like the amounts that's like left over on a needle stick is probably enough to like cause your body to start
to infect you.
Infect you. So dengue virus, apparently there was a needle stick, and this happened in 2014. I was surprised because in my brain, dengue fever is like mosquito borne, and like this person got dengue in the lab
from a needle stick.
I mean,
that makes sense if it can be mosquito borne though.
Yeah, I know, but like,
but that's
you don't think about you don't think about getting dengue fever in like the middle of winter in like lab. E. coli happened fairly recently. This happened in 2000. What is the year? But basically, 4 people were handling like petri dishes, and the E. coli had like bred to like a more virulent form, and it was just like on their gloves, and I think they like were touching their phones or touching their keys, and it fomited. Oh, wow. Which is the version where like you touch something and it gets transferred.
And it transfers to
and then like I think everybody carries a phone around, and that's like a spray your phone, so y'all
put phone or put hand sanitizer in your phone sometimes.
Yeah, like a relatively common way to get a fomite or a cold or something is something that you touch a lot and then touch your face or
I was reading a thing that apparently like one of the most common like causes of death from laboratory acquired infections is something called like brucellosis, which is from Brucella bacteria, which I didn't even know are like a thing, but apparently they infect people in labs a lot.
I think it's called the fried rice the fried rice disease. I think that's hold on, I had that one down too. It was called it had a really unfortunate name it's Bacillus cereus.
Oh yeah.
Bacillus cereus. So this is like it also sounds like Bacillus cereus. So like it's serious.
Like it's serious or like cereal.
No, but it's unfortunately a name. But so it's a bacteria that can grow, and it likes to grow in grains, and its optimal temperature for growing is like room temperature. So it's like they call it the fried rice like disease, because fried rice like tends to get left out,
Mhm.
and then you eat it, and then it grows in the rice kernels, and then you consume it, and then that's enough to get you really ill. So use your refrigerators.
Uh-huh.
Put your rice in the refrigerator, basically.
Also,
like,
pasta in the refrigerator.
yeah, pasta, like wheat things, like just like starch. You know what? Put everything in the fridge. Like, when you're done eating it, put it in the fridge.
Okay, my friend was actually complaining about this. Like, she was like, "Wait," or not complaining, but she was like, "Nathan, why do you like refrigerate all your food?" And I'm like, "Actually, I mean, I think partly because like my dad is a food scientist who studies foodborne disease."
And you're like, I'm really careful
Yeah.
about what I ingest.
I mean, I'm not even that careful. I just like that was always the default. Like at our house is like, if there's food that you've opened, you put it in the
You put it in the
refrigerator.
fridge.
Yeah. Mhm. Or the
Because
freezer.
yeah. Like the things just happen. Like, oh, like this HIV transmission, this was super sad. So this one happened recently. This happened in 2012. Like, this lab tech was centrifuging blood samples, and one of the blood samples, when he pulled out of the thing, like the cap came
Ooh.
off, and it like the droplet of it like flew into his eye, and he was wearing contact lenses, and so like contact lenses, I guess he didn't wear them often. It caused a little bit of conjunctivitis, and then that was enough for him to get
infected.
and
Did
it's like
go
super rare to get HIV from like saliva or like any samples that are like not a needle stick. Like, you know what I mean? It's hard
Uh-huh.
to get HIV from like without blood to blood contact. Like, he got it from like pulling a sample out of a centrifuge, and the cap popped off, and it like went in his eye, and he didn't even think about it because it was just like, you know, whatever. And then he got really high HIV titers, and he was just like, what?
That's
Right?
so sad.
That's so sad. And I was just like, he did everything right. Like,
Yeah.
I wouldn't think to like flush my eyes
Yeah.
for 15 minutes holding it wide open. So like, when in doubt, err on the side of more dangerous.
Yeah, I do think that's actually one thing. So like, there's all these things that happen. I think one of the interesting things about this is kind of how we responded to it. So especially when HIV became prevalent, we started using what was called universal precautions, and is now called some other things, where essentially any sort of body fluid that comes from a person, you actually assume that it has like all sorts of nasty viruses and
Yeah.
stuff in it. And basically, so you kind of treat anything that is like a fluid that comes from a person or any human tissue
Yeah.
like it's a biohazard.
Yeah.
And that has actually like helped reduce these infections a lot.
Yeah, I think so. It also changed like the practice of
Mhm.
medicine a little bit, because
Yeah.
like now they wear gloves and
Mhm.
face shields and like masks and stuff, and because it's like, you know, everybody who does it, it doesn't feel like it's like a like, I don't want to touch you
Like a
because you're sick.
stigma thing.
Yeah, it's not like a
Yeah.
stigma thing anymore. Now
Uh-huh.
it's just like, you know, you're at the doctor's
It's just like,
office,
this
like
is
they
the
wear a lab
procedure.
coat, like
Yeah.
like that's why they're wearing it, is so
Right.
that they don't get their normal clothes dirty. And yeah, I also, this is like a side note, but whenever I see people wear lab coats into like the cafeteria, I think it's like the grossest thing.
Yeah.
Lab coats or like scrubs. Whenever I see them in like dining halls, I like gag a little.
You're like, I'm just
I'm
like, what are you doing?
Yeah,
Like,
why?
do you,
Why are you
do you
wearing-
understand how
the
this
point of wearing
works?
that, it's so you don't get the dirty stuff in the clean stuff.
I also feel like many people use gloves incorrectly. Like they're just
Oh,
like,
yeah.
it's this like magic talisman that protects you against like bacteria or whatever. It's like, no, you have to like actually take them off, like when you go from the dirty area to the clean.
Yeah, or also taking them off correctly,
Mhm.
like incorrectly. Like, I mean, we can do it consciously, or like we don't have to think about it that hard because we do it all the time. But I imagine the first couple times you're doing it, it's a really awkward thing to be like, yeah, you need to like touch only the clean part, or the dirty part to pull it off, and then the other side, now you can only touch the clean side to pull it off. Like, it's a kind of complicated thing. Spills also happen a lot. I feel like that's quite scary. I think your first spill, everybody spills. If you're in the lab, you spill. This is why I also do well network with dangerous biochemical things,
If you
because
spill them,
yeah, because
it's
I've
good. Yeah.
I've often spilled things. Like, it's an accident. Like, it's basically inevitable. Like, if you, it's just like a lotto. Like, the more you do it, the more likely you would accidentally like knock a beaker off a table and then like have to deal with it on the ground. everybody has to deal with it. I think the first couple times you do it, it's a little scary. Like,
and you like rather not your beak contain like
deadly
virus.
Yeah, it would be really nice for it to not
Yeah.
carry deadly virus. I like to be like, the only time I'm like really careful of my samples is like because of an experiment that I really cared about, and not because it might kill me.
or someone else.
Or someone or everyone around me. Yeah, like that's quite scary. That's where my line is.
I think another thing that I was reading about was, so it's also related to kind of like how do you prevent these problems, and it was actually, so I was reading, it was talking about how one of the things people are really worried about in like the 70s or so was kind of recombinant DNA technology, and like how that might affect things, because kind of that was when we first had the ability to kind of like engineer pathogens. And so like one of the things that people were thinking about was like, you have this virus, for example, called simian virus 40 that you could use to insert genes into cells, but it also tends to cause cancer. So people are like, okay, what happens if like someone gets infected with that and then it gets out of the lab and now you have this like cancer causing virus spreading?
Yeah.
And so interestingly, a lot of places actually banned recombinant DNA research entirely.
Really? I didn't know that.
Yeah. So we are currently in a suburb of Boston, and the reason that there's a ton of life science stuff around here is because actually it was banned. Like recombinant DNA research was banned almost anywhere around Boston except here.
Oh wow, I did not know that.
Yeah.
Like that's why we're in this particular suburb.
Like,
of
right.
Boston.
So kind of there's this area where basically there's just like all these life science companies, and then the reason is because it's like the only spot in the region that didn't ban it.
Oh.
And I didn't even know that. It was like I was at a town hall like community organizing thing, and someone just mentioned that. And yeah, I was surprised, but apparently it was quite common just because everyone was
Like,
scared,
really scared
of
of
these
it.
things.
Yeah. I didn't know that. I do think that a lot of humans, like a lot of scientists are we try to be really careful because we know how dangerous things are. Like I think when you're like when we're scared of something, we try to know more about it. I think that was my response during the pandemic too. I was like, I don't know, like what's
You're
happening.
just like, I'm gonna learn everything about coronavirus.
Yeah, I did. I think that's a lot of scientists' approach to like, this is a scary thing. I want to know more about it, just so that we like we can like mitigate its like the impact of it. So one of the things that we like, some of all these like safety trainings, I like moan and groan about it, but like I understand why they're there. Like it is important for me to know where the eye wash stations are on every floor. Like I mean, at least on all the floors I am on, in case someone's got exposed and I need to help them turn on the water. But some of the like kind of crazier things are there are like islands. So I mentioned the BSL-4s that like the whole like room will incinerate itself from the inside.
Yeah.
Like at a push of a button. There's also like isolation things. So I heard off the coast of Texas, there's literally a laboratory on an island, and there's like a little footbridge. It's like that's a footbridge where like things can come in and out. And should something go wrong, like instead of incinerating, it just isolates. Like it's an island that it just like closes
it
off.
Just becomes like a plague island.
It just becomes the plague island.
Wow.
And I'm sure like if you worked in those labs, you would be a lot more like vigilant. So in the previous place I worked, we had a lot of people working on like coronavirus during the pandemic, and they worked in rooms where they couldn't take their lab books out. Like they would have to like paste their lab notebook up against a window and then like degown, decontaminate, come outside, take a picture of their lab notebook from the day, from their experiments and results, and then like decontaminate their phone and then go out the secondary like cleaning room, and then they had like their lab notebook for the day on their phone on the picture.
Did people do that consistently, or did some
No,
people...
so it was like that even before the pandemic.
Oh wow.
So like that is just the level that they work on. Like that's the level I cannot work on. That's their daily.
I mean, I'm curious though, and it's like, so it does have a really high level of adherence.
Like I think when certain people like work with certain things, that's just normal to them. Like you know how we put on gloves, like the full gown, the full Teletubby suit, and like mask, and like the air like the machine that blows air into their mask that's like filtered and stuff, like that is just the default clean. I think that's a lot.
I mean, but it makes sense. Like, I mean, I used to work in a place where like we had to put on a bunch of equipment to avoid contaminating experiments. And like, honestly, at like the start of the pandemic, I was just like, why are people complaining this much about masks? Like, it's just
not
like
that bad.
it's just like it's just a thing that you do, and like you get used to it. Like we did this whole thing where you would kind of like awkwardly hop through this decontamination thing while putting things on your shoes, and you like couldn't touch the ground like with your shoe until you had the boot on. But anyway, I'm just like, like if you can do that, you can just
put a mask on.
Yes, because we did it like every day, several times a day.
It was fine. The mask never bothered me. I never had a problem wearing it. Like even we were like, you're sweaty, and I was like, have you been in the lab? Like we're all sweaty the whole time. And it's like hours. Like we would do experiments, right? Like they'll be like 4 hours, and we would have a mask on for 4 hours. Like it was not a problem.
Yeah, you're just like, it's just a thing you do. But
mitigating the scaries.
Right. The reason I was asking that question though, like about how consistently people do it, it's like because there's been a lot of discussion like in the news about kind of like the risks of gain of function research, and kind of like could labs actually like kind of create like a pandemic accidentally, or create an infectious disease accidentally. And kind of my thought about it has always been like, I think one thing that isn't talked about is the fact that like people who work with dangerous things are very aware that they're working with dangerous things, and kind of that we are also aware that we're the people who are most at risk. So kind of like the risk of a pandemic is a lot less than kind of just the risk that you give yourself like garden variety HIV.
That's true. I'd like to think that the people who choose to do research in like infectious diseases, for example, are like quite selfless and like good humans. I'd like to think that. I think that's like I just assume that they're just good humans that wanted to work with these diseases and did not like go through years of schooling just to be like, like some evil villain from a movie, from a cartoon. Like that seems very unlikely to me. Like, why would you do that?
I mean, the thing that I see, like when I read about this, like on Twitter and stuff, is not that people are saying like they're evil. It's that people are saying kind of like, and there's actually this weird group of people who now think that like virologists are all part of a conspiracy to like cover up the origins of COVID, because then they wouldn't be able to do gain of function research. I think my issue with this, so the kind of it's less that they're evil, and it's more like the assertion is like they're not caring about the safety because they want to continue doing their research and they want to get all this grant money and stuff like that. I guess my issue with that is I think like kind of people who do that research are very aware that they're the ones at risk. Like kind of like,
they're on the front lines.
Right.
Like, they know they're putting their lives on the line.
Like even if they're not selfless, like it's just they
know how bad it is.
Right. Yeah. Like you are like it's a personal thing. It's like, okay, you are working with something that's dangerous. You're going to be very careful about it just to protect yourself.
Yeah. I think a nice way to think about it is like let's say like you're a glass blower, like a person that works with glass. There's a name for this, and my brain is completely blanking. But like people who like blow glass and like create vases and stuff, they work with like a really hot, dangerous item. They like the moment they're in that room, they know exactly where the hot thing is in the building. And they know every instrument that's been near the hot thing and has a hot thing on it. Like they're hyper aware of where it is. Like I mean, they'll still probably have accidents because accidents happen, but like the moment they're on the floor, like near a glory hole, like they know how long this instrument's been in it.
Near a what?
Like the stove, the stove. I think it's called a glory hole. At least last time I went to. I know.
Like, I wanted to clarify. What are we talking about?
We're talking about glass making and blowing glass to make like cups and stuff.
Blowing glass. I see. Okay.
Someone's head is in the gutter today. No, but like they're really aware of where like the really hot glass is. They are really aware of where the stove is. They're really cognizant of it. I think it's the same with science. Like we know exactly which what thing is thawing on ice right now, and we need to be really careful with it. Or like or like when we're not. These are the examples. Like it was while it was easy to find these examples, they're also far and few between. Like,
Yeah.
which is
Yeah.
good. Like,
It's actually interesting. You can kind of tell who has been, like, you can tell if someone has worked in a biology lab because you give them a jar to open. And, like, if they, like, take the lid off, the jar off like that, and then set it down with, like, the side that was near the food, like, on the counter, they probably are not a biologist.
oh, I didn't think about that. We always flip
Yes.
it up, right?
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Or hold on to it with your hand and then just put it back on the jar.
Oh, that's true. Because
Uh-huh.
we have dealt with the
Mhm.
contamination.
Right, exactly. It's like when you do it for a certain amount. So for anyone who's not who isn't familiar with this, like, so like when you're doing lab work, you have to open a lot of things, and when you do that, you have to be really careful about what you set it down on, because you could be contaminating either the surface or your container that the lid goes to.
Yeah.
So we get very unconsciously good at, like, placing things in ways that don't contaminate stuff, and also opening doors without touching them with
Oh
our
yeah,
hands.
I think we've gotten really good at that,
Yeah.
especially during the pandemic. I
Mhm.
think a lot more people started
Yes.
paying attention.
Learned the skills.
Yeah, of opening a door.
Uh-huh. I still, like, poke elevator buttons with my keys, because, like, I
I
get
do
my keys
too.
out and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna go in this house, and then I'm just like, okay, I'll poke the button with
Yeah.
the key. And
No,
then-
when I was growing up, my parents would tell me to poke doors or elevators with the back of my knuckles, because
that
there are
makes
like
sense,
places that
yeah.
are less likely to
Uh-huh.
touch your face.
Mhm.
And I was just like, I guess it's right. I think it works.
That's smart.
But yeah, but
Yeah.
during the pandemic, I did change to using keys or my elbows a lot.
Mhm.
And I was just like, you literally cannot touch your elbow to your face.
Yeah.
It's a hard place to touch to your face. Just like wash your elbows in the shower. I guess it's good.
I mean, you don't really need to wash them, though, because they don't even really touch anything.
They touched every door I went through today.
But, like, they're not gonna, I guess, like, they're gonna contaminate the doors for other people, so it's a good
Yeah.
idea to wash them.
That's true. Yeah, I mean, I think, yeah, during the pandemic, I think
Mhm.
all the stresses of like dangerous things, like it wasn't that hard for us to
Mhm.
mitigate it, because we
Yeah.
had we had skills. We had some skills, or at least with the fomites.
I'm
at
like,
least.
wow, finally my ability to open a door by kicking it is used.
Yeah, and not just
Yes,
necessity. It's like, I mean, sorry, it wasn't just like a quirk.
Like
Now it's a
yeah.
useful thing.
I mean, it's useful in the lab, but
Yeah.
like, it's useful when your hands are like full of rats. But like,
Or like you're holding like boxes and you can open
Yeah.
the door.
yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Hopefully
Anyway,
that
yeah.
was an
Mhm.
entertaining Halloween stream. I think I had a fun time
Yeah.
talking about
Uh-huh.
random
Yeah, yeah.
science safety things. So be safe, happy sciencing. Happy Halloween.
Yes. Happy Halloween.
Yeah. Thanks for joining us. We're
Yeah.
Philosophy Sciencing every Thursday at 9.
Good night.
Good night.